My buddy, got drafted in 50 to 52, and I got drafted in 52 to 54. And he said it was bad over there. He said, you got to be good, you got to be tough.
It was put on a deuce-and-a-half truck, sent up north across the 38th parallel. When we were on the front lines, that little fellow was dedicated to the American soldier.
I don't think the words "forgotten war" will be forgotten. We're hoping that we can get one word, one phrase that will cover this, and it'll do justice to our Korean War vets.
The Korean War is a conflict sometimes referred to as the Forgotten War. For the veterans of the Korean War and later the Korean defense from West Michigan, those words are far from true. Being the first major conflict of the Cold War, this 3-year war killed millions of civilians, claimed the lives of over 36,000 U.S. soldiers, and the aftermath is still unfolding today. The Korean Peninsula had been one nation for centuries, but in the aftermath of World War II, as the peninsula was liberated from Japanese rule, Korea found itself being split by the world's two superpowers.
It was agreed that the Soviet Union would take care of the north half of Korea, and the United States would take care of the south half. However, there was no boundary. There was no way to know who stops where, who goes where. There was no political boundary, no line of demarcation, nothing. There was 2 young lieutenant colonels that were tasked with finding a boundary, and it had to be done ASAP. There was no map at the State Department, but on their way out of the State Department, there was a table in the waiting room, and on it was a National Geographic with Korea on the cover. They took the book, opened it up, and then went back to their secure room, and they opened it up and they saw the map. They opened up the map, and the 38th parallel was right there dividing Korea in half. Quickly, the news was sent over to Molotov, and Molotov sent it to Stalin. Stalin approved it that day. It was supposed to be temporary until the occupation forces were done and pacifying the Japanese and sending them back to Japan. That never happened.
In 1948, the Korean Peninsula became 2 nations, the Republic of Korea in the south and the Democratic People's Republic of Korea in the north, separated on the 38th parallel, separating families and an entire people. On June 25, 1950, the North crossed that line.
The land of the morning calm became the land of death and destruction. There was about 80,000 North Koreans that crossed the 38th parallel, violating the sovereignty of South Korea. Along with them was also about 150 T-34 Russian tanks that were supporting them. They captured Seoul in 3 days, and they were a juggernaut on the move.
The North powered through South Korea, pushing down all the way near the city of Busan. President Truman classified the conflict in Korea as a UN police action, resulting in 21 countries sending troops or medical units to the south.
Then there was the breakout of Busan, but before that, just the day before the breakout of Busan started, was the Incheon landing. Douglas MacArthur's miracle. It was actually a total surprise. He cut off all supplies, all troops.
The combined US, UN, and South Korean forces then drove the North Koreans back north of the 38th, but as they traveled further north, winter began to set in.
It was in the middle of the winter in December, and it was cold. We moved on the front lines in the first week of December, and then we spent time off and on the front lines on the Western Front. And it was only years later when I read a story about the war in Korea from the 3rd Division. The 1st of February, this gentleman said they went on a patrol. It was 25 below. And that was the night I remember when we were ready to move on the line. And I think I shivered all night.
We're talking 30 to 30 below, and the deeper the winter got, and the howling winds coming through the Manchurian mountains. They called it the Manchurian Express. It was definitely bitterly cold, 50 below zero cold.
As the war approached the Yalu River, China entered the fight on the side of North Korea, pushing the U.S. into a retreat, leading into the famed evacuation of Hungnam Port in December 1950, described by Voss as the second miracle.
90,000 North Koreans seeking freedom to get out of North Korea. Most people never have heard of this. Harbor Master Colonel Forney decided, okay, we'll just, first thing first, all people on board of all the ships. Then whatever equipment we can get out, we'll take with us, and then we'll destroy the rest that's left behind. And that is exactly what happened.
The war continued, with both sides grappling to take control of land.
My buddy, he got drafted in 50 to 52, and I got drafted in 52 to 54. And he said it was bad over there, and he said, you've got to be good, you've got to be tough. He said, there's a lot of mountains over there, you've got to be strong.
Everybody had what they called a Korean service boy. He was 10, 12 years old, and they would just join up with us, and they liked to be around the soldiers. Well, this one was a North Korean that came in our unit, and his name was Ogiwan, and he had a scar about 6 inches across right by his ear. And I said to him, how'd you get that, Ogiwan? He had been a North Korean, and he was helping as a service boy to the Korean. And this officer got mad at him and took the sword and slashed him across the head when we were on the front lines. That little fellow was, shall we say, dedicated to the American soldier. When the division pulled off to retrain after casualties and rotations and things like that, for some reason he could not go with us. And I had to tell him that. And the day that we left, he was standing off to the corner crying his heart out, because he was losing a friend. And I felt the same way.
July 27, 1953 was when the Armistice Agreement was signed, creating the current border seen today. While the fighting stopped, there was no peace treaty, and the war technically continues 70 years later.
I mean, it was really a deadly, brutal, exhaustive war. The casualties in that war were just ungodly. 1 in 8, that is huge casualties percentage. I want to emphasize this percentage.
I was glad to get home. I lost a lot of friends on the first boat that I took training with, Uniontown, Pennsylvania. It's hard to see them get on that boat and leave and not come back.
When U.S. soldiers from Korea returned home, there was no large celebration, and as the decades ran by, they found the war that they sacrificed in referred to as the Forgotten War.
Because Americans really think the Forgotten War is a forgotten war. But our Korean War vets really detest it.
Their sacrifices are remembered by the people of South Korea, as Project Soldier, a project by South Korean photographer Rami Hyun, visited West Michigan to capture the portraits of those who defended a people they had never met.
Everybody here, including me, we want free country. The freedom to us, it was not a duty, it was a right for us. Because somebody sacrificed, especially Korean War veterans sacrificed freedom for us. The reason my mom, my father still alive, because they sacrificed themselves.
I think we are very thankful. It's really not easy to fight for, it's not easy, let alone fighting for your own country, but other countries, right? So we're very thankful, and we don't think that we would have the freedom that we have today without their efforts.
These veterans also feel pride in knowing that their service defended a nation that has prospered, George Stark saw South Korea again with his own eyes after a trip paid for by the South Korean government.
The revisit that the South Korea paid for 4 years ago really showed the contrast of how well the country has built up since I was there. And the welcoming and the warmness that the South Korean people showed toward us is very much appreciated.
Tooth and nail, we did everything we could. They call it a tie. No, look at Korea now. It is the 10th largest economy in the world.
When they sometimes say that Korea was a forgotten war, we like to call it a forgotten victory because of how South Korea turned out.
As for the people themselves, we're closer than we've ever been. It's like, I like to just say brothers and sisters from different mothers and fathers.
They have a lot of guilty because they survived in the war. But the picture is not taken just outside, picture is taken inside too. So when they see their own portrait, they realize they're not coward, they're actually heroes.